and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of this bell. May all of you who listen to me awaken from your forgetfulness. Forgetfulness is the opposite of mindfulness.
Floating out there, and all these animals are being hurt by it.
Our planet's future is in the balance. Antarctica's ice, the Amazon rainforest, Russia's permafrost and ocean currents have all been identified as tipping points in the Earth's system.
Taking care about our only home, this planet, is not just government's responsibility. All humanity, all individuals have the responsibility. And then, I always telling, the war, bloodshed, immediately striking in our mind. But the damaging the ecology or these global sort of the warming, these things, without much sort of, obvious, but invisibly, you see, month by month, decay. So once we feel some difficulties to breathing, difficulties to eyes, and particularly children, then maybe too late. So therefore, this, you see, something very serious, and then we, each of us, 7 billion human beings, taking care about global sort of these global issues should be our part of our life.
I think that most people would kind of naturally, most modern people would kind of distinguish those two. They would see nature as being something that we may exist within, but we're separate from. Mm-hmm. And I think certain spiritual traditions like Christianity can actually encourage that by emphasizing that, as it says in some places in the Bible, that humans have dominion over nature, that nature exists for human beings, and I think there's been a tendency, as the history of our species has, in the last 1,000 years, the last 2,000 years maybe, that we've come to see ourselves as kind of superior to nature, as outside of nature. But in my tradition, we're taught that there is no separation. The separation is an illusion. We think of ourselves as separate, but in fact, we are absolutely part of nature, and we often talk about not so much nature, but the earth, the earth, and the earth in all of its natural components, not just its living sentient beings, but in the the minerals, the soil, the water. All those things are part of our bodies. If we look at our bodies, there's no part of our bodies, no atom in our bodies that doesn't come from nature, from the natural world.
Our tradition goes back to Tibetan roots. And those early Tibetan Buddhist roots were they had a lot of things in common with the indigenous religions in Tibet. There was a recognition of the spirit world, and there was a recognition of ceremonies like burning juniper and things like that to kind of really sort of try to appeal to the spirit. So there was that from its start in Tibet with those kind of indigenous religions at the time. it has always had kind of that connection with the natural, with nature.
In Buddhist logic, Dignaga, who was an old logician back in the 450 Common Era, said that mind cannot arise from anything but mind. It can't arise from matter, right? And so our minds have their own continuum based on cause and effect from that point of view. When a baby is conceived, the Buddhist view is a mental continuum enters during the conception, right? Then a human cannot exist without that, what's called a governing cause, which is the mind, and the conditional cause, which is the body. And then the body totally is dependent on air to breathe, water, food, shelter, warmth, right? And so we're completely dependent on our environment.
We have this very important principle of oneness of life and its environment, that our life and the environment are not distinct entities, but they are actually one and inseparable. And it demonstrates that the cause of our joys and sorrows in our environment and all the other situations in our environment are actually a manifestation of our inner state of life. So they're not distinct, of course, they are interrelated. The happier we are from within, the happier our surroundings are going to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can look at it from ignorance, from what I would call a general perspective, because what happens is the modern material man, even medieval, or even you don't have this enlightened outlook that there's this world that I ought to say is essentially all about preserving oneself. The I and mine, it starts with you, and then the next level of ego, you might say, is your family, and then so on and so forth. Then it's your little village or your province or your country, and so on. So that's so-called naturalistic tendencies, and that's not going to go anywhere.
If we take our economic growth at one end and conservation of our environment at the other, so evidently this will create conflicts. Buddhism is definitely not against the commerce. We have a strong component emphasis on, for example, if people are rich and wealthy, it's because of their past good karma. We're not against the rich, and then we definitely think that this is because of their past actions and deeds. Then that's the fruit that they enjoy at this moment. But we're trying to avoid going into either extreme.
So I think that what happened was that as we started to develop tools and technology and a kind of attitude of that nature was there for us, that we were superior to nature, and that nature was good to the extent that it served us. How could we use it for our benefit? And also, so we also then took that same attitude towards people. So we have the same attitude towards each other as we do towards nature as a whole. That is, how are you going to be useful to me? We are addicted to this process of extraction and growth and consumerism, which we know on one level is a kind of insanity. I mean, not a kind of insanity, it's total insanity.
I think it really comes down from what we call fundamental darkness. So every person, every single human being, we believe that every single person has a Buddha nature. At the same time, every single person has a fundamental darkness. and it can be interchangeable with the word ignorance. So if you ignore the fact that every single person has a Buddha nature, you can't believe that you know oneness of environment yourself. And if you cannot believe yourself that you have a Buddha nature, you kind of disconnect from the society, from the society, from yourself, right? So yeah, I think we always, moment to moment, every single minute and second, we fight in ourselves.
So I think the degradation of the environment is a symptom, an outcome of suffering. When you see, I mean, you sort of see the connection between the, again, sort of the exploitation of the environment driven by commercialism, materialism, consumerism, constant growth, people feeling like they need all of this stuff. And so they're experiencing dukkha that is leading to an excessive exploitation of nature and the environment. Kind of people in the kind of, we call it the eco-dharma world, are suffering because they see the degradation of the environment. So it's now a source of suffering. So we should care about the earth because it's part of what we're connected to.
Really, the thing that causes dukkha, the main cause of dukkha in the Buddhist point of view, is grasping itself, and then on top of that, self-cherishing, cherishing oneself over others. That's all in service of the self. And by approaching it that way, the karma that's created from a Buddhist point of view is going to be the nature of suffering. So really, the Buddhist point of view is that to get rid of self-cherishing, we need compassion.
If we consider our mental, verbal, and bodily actions as a part of this quote-unquote practice or meditation or a path to liberation. So everything that we do, we say, and we think will definitely carry consequences. You know, I think all the religion, not only Buddhism, have to address the current social and economic issues. So I don't think Buddhism can be escaped from that concern.
Or somebody who lives in the forest must be aware of the trees and the streams and the flora and the fauna around him to take care of that because he's living there. So that's the beginning of environmentalism in that sense, not in your modernistic 21st century understanding, just to care for what is literally around him, not in every part of the world, which is what modern environmentalism is trying to tell you, which is fine. I mean, but what's that little bumper sticker? Think globally but act locally. Perhaps he was doing that. That would be good, right? We can all do things only locally. We can't be flying. We don't have either the fiscal or the physical wherewithal to do so. The consciousness, or bringing into consciousness this environmental sensitivity, if you want to call it that, is already there. Okay, all you got to do is sign off and tap into that way of thinking.
Take some action, and it doesn't need to be, everybody doesn't need to do the same thing, but sort of to be aware of what's going on and the situation that we're in, and then take whatever action you can, whether it's just kind of reducing your own carbon footprint or engaging with other people to go out and join a climate strike or a climate mobilization. So that's one thing. And then also taking some of the Dharma teachings and mindfulness teachings as a way to help people through the crisis, so that, as we see what's happening in the world, instead of kind of just collapsing in despair, by embracing and cultivating some of these virtues of gratitude, compassion, generosity, and those will help other people, and they will also make the individual feel better. So if you're kind of embracing and cultivating those values, there's less room to feel, kind of fear and despair.
Cultivate compassionate insight every day of your life. And people, I think your age, are very acutely aware that if we don't do something, this isn't going to be fun. My hope is that you stick with it and you don't give up. There's a saying that one great meditation master made, which is very popular, which is never give up. Not to give up on yourself, not to give up on humanity, not to give up on the environment, but to do what you can. The saddest thing is that people who are doing this don't believe in past and future lives. They don't believe in karma, right? And yet, from a Buddhist point of view, they're going to inherit the earth they're destroying. And the suffering from them will be immense down the road. And so I think it's a compassionate act to them, as well as to yourselves, to work together to stop this and to turn it around. And again, to put in leadership people who have sensibility in terms of how to restore the environment and protect it.
The most important thing is to establish your own personal practice of meditation and mindfulness, and to find a community that supports that practice, so that it just becomes a part of your daily life. And the earlier that you do that, the earlier in your life trajectory, you will be able to identify these toxic elements that you've incorporated into your being from the larger competitive, kind of unhealthy civilization that we live in.
When you graduate, walking out of this campus, the first thing is you need to find a job and you need to compete. But again, we need to survive. But how we survive?
I think what this Buddhism talks about is hope, always hope for the future.
I think that hope is a decision. So if we decide hope, we take action, right? So yeah, taking an action, whatever that you think is right. And that's definitely aligning with the Buddhist teaching.
Also, like we talked about, everything is interconnected, the connectedness between the life and its environment. At the same time, our individual lives exert a profound and potentially unlimited influence. So even if it's just one person fighting for the environment, that person can create huge amounts of change as well. Yes. And yeah, it is Buddhism that encourages and enables people to become aware of that great power they have within themselves, and to draw that power forth and use it to, to create a society that we want to live in. Yeah. We would love to be living in.
So we always wake up the bell, pick it up, and then we sound it 3 times.